Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller. I'm joined today, very excited, to have Fred Haney from fredhaney.com and Wealth Management. Fred, welcome.
Hi, Brent. Thanks. Great to be here. My company's Venture Management.
Venture Management, my bad. You're exactly right. Venture Management, I can't, yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And Fred, the first thing we always start with is kind of your background and journey, right, leading up to where you're at today. So if you kind of give us some of the highlights, you have a very, very extensive background, which I think is really going to resonate with a lot of our audience.
I'm not going to go through all my college stuff, but I am going to start with getting my PhD at Carnegie Mellon University. And the reason for that is that I worked there with some of the pioneers of artificial intelligence. And
Yeah, you did.
PhD thesis in a programming language called IPL5, Information Processing Language 5, that was designed by Alan Newell and Herb Simon, who are a couple of the early pioneers in artificial intelligence. And my thesis was written in that language. Alan Newell had one of the first chess playing programs. I mean, this was late 60s. At that time, it took him about 7 hours to look 4 steps ahead. And today, we can do that in milliseconds.
Yeah, like, right.
But that
was a computing power back then, right?
The computing power, we'll talk about it, but the computing power was like 1 trillion times faster practically than it is today. It's just amazing. And then from Carnegie Mellon, I came to California to work for Scientific Data Systems. I knew I wanted to be in the computer business. I interviewed the different computer companies. And the head of the computer science department at Carnegie Mellon knew one of the top software designers at Scientific Data Systems. At that time, SDS was about equivalent to DEC. I don't know, 50 million in sales, maybe something like that.
Right.
So I started with Scientific Data Systems, and I would have thought my career was going to be designing complicated software systems, information systems, that kind of stuff. But then after a couple of years, Xerox bought us for $980 million, which was the largest acquisition at that time. And Xerox turned me gradually into a corporate strategic planning executive. So I ended up doing startups inside Xerox. I was responsible at one point for all of the strategic planning inside Xerox, except the copier business. So it was all the stuff that was headquartered here on the West Coast. It was Ethernet, word processing, the workstation that should be the Xerox Macintosh.
Yeah.
If you know the story, I got the business plan. I lost the political battle. I tried to get Xerox to keep that technology. So then I did the same thing for a couple of years at Computer Sciences Corporation and at TRW. But at TRW, it turned more into an operational experience. I ran a division for 1.5 years and sold it, and sold another division of TRW to called Datacom International to DataPoint Corporation.
Yep.
And at that point, partly because of all the work I'd done with startups inside large companies and also because of the operating experience, I got recruited to set up and run a high-tech venture capital fund, Silicon Valley style, but here in Southern California. And I was recruited by 3i Group, who are the largest venture capital company in the world. That sounds like bragging, but they're really huge. It's a consortium of British banks that was formed right after World War II to funnel money back into private enterprise.
Got it.
By the early 80s, they were generating more profit on their portfolio than they could reinvest in the UK. So they wanted to diversify and they wanted to get into high-tech venture capital. So I set that up. It was the most active venture capital fund in Southern California in the latter part of the 80s. We were a 6-person team. We invested $80 million in 60 different companies and ended up with 20 IPOs, 20 acquisitions, and 20 dead companies, basically. So
it's 1 for 3, and that thing is probably a really good hit rate, right?
It was an outstanding performance, good portfolio. We were all six of us had been CEOs of companies. We positioned ourselves as guys who knew how to help build companies.
Right.
And because of that, we got to syndicate a lot of deals with the Silicon Valley venture capital firms, Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, Institutional Venture Partners, some others. But then in the early 90s, 3i decided to stop making investments in the U.S. They got partly turned off by the lengthy period of time. It was like 4 years after Black Monday, October 19th, 1987. The stock market fell 23, 22 points. It's still the largest single day drop. And then the IPO market shut down. So there was no liquidity for about 4 years. 3i decided to stop making new investments. But then in 1992, we tied with Sequoia Capital for the most IPOs. We had 7, and the portfolio was pretty much liquidated by about 1995, 1996, something like that. And they were sharp enough to at least continue to provide capital to keep the companies alive. So after that, I helped start Tech Coast Angels. I'm not active with them now, but it was the largest angel group in the country, about 250 people at one point. I continue to work with startup companies. I've been the co-founder of 7 startups, and pull all that together into a book called The Fundable Startup. And recently I just completed writing a 11-hour online video class about how to write the best pitch deck
For a startup
you're going to have.
Yeah.
And a lot of my time these days is spent supporting a group called Monday Club. I actually started in the 80s at 3i, but today it's a group of there are 1,400 people on the mailing list. We have maybe 30 people meet online once a month, and we review 2 startup company pitch decks. We're not trying to be investors. A lot of us are, and once in a while we do an investment. Our purpose is really to just pick out a couple companies that we think have a lot of promise, but that aren't telling their story well, and help them tighten up their mission.
So when you do that, are you using that collective brain power to analyze the company and then compare it against how they're pitching, right? That's what it sounds like, right? You're seeing that they have potential. They just don't know how to do it. They haven't read your book or taken your course.
Yeah, we're basically just trying to help them improve their chances of getting funded.
Yeah.
Part of it's helping them improve the pitch deck, but also sometimes companies meet somebody who could help, serve as an advisor or director. There's one company that formed its entire board of directors by pulling members from Monday Club.
I can totally see the value in that.
Good networking. I mean, sometimes somebody will say, "Hey, I know some guys you ought to talk to. Maybe they're strategic partners." It's a free thing. Nobody's paying for it, but it's a powerful network.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely it is. So let's talk about now today, right? You have all this background. You wrote the book. Now you created this great course on how to write this. What's the vision? Are you going to continue to invest? Are you going to continue to educate, or both?
Well, one thing I'm going to continue to do is run Monday Club.
Yeah.
And I do some investing, but it's on a very selective basis. And also on a very selective basis, I'll get involved as a co-founder in a company. I mean, that's how I became part of these 7 different companies that I helped start. I enjoy doing that. At my age, I could be playing golf a lot more than I do, but I sort of mix my time. I really enjoy my work, and I'm still working pretty hard.
I don't blame you. If you love what you do, it's not work.
Well, I really enjoy helping to build companies. I've served on well over 30 boards of directors. I've had a lot of successful exits. I've had a couple $100 million plus exits in the last several years. Not to me, but companies that
they are part of it.
Were sold for more than $100 million. So I enjoy what I'm doing, and just sifting through pitch decks for Monday Club. It's not a full-time job, but it takes a lot of my time. And I usually sit down with the people and go through the pitch deck before they present to Monday Club. So Monday Club is sort of step 2.
which is really a better way to do it, right?
And my whole pitch, my competitive advantage is that there just aren't a lot of investors or advisors who have as much experience as I do. Frankly, most guys with my level of experience are partners in top tier venture capital funds.
Right.
And I was one. I mean, it's a
Right.
work of history that I'm not now. But I'm basically trying to act like a venture capitalist, even though I don't have $1 billion fund record.
Right. Right. I totally get it. Tell us a little bit, maybe pick one or two a story. I mean, you've had multiple companies, get sold, right? Yeah, at least 7 of them, right, that you were a part of. Can you just give us one or two stories on that? Because I think people be really interested in some of the things you were involved.
One fairly recent one was an Orange County company. It's called Parcel Pending. It was founded by Lori Torres, and her idea was to build a bank of lockers for delivery of packages in the lobby of big apartment complexes. FedEx didn't just come in and throw it on the floor. So now when they deliver, they put it in a locker and an access code gets sent to the apartment resident. That business did really well. That was one of the 100 billion plus exits a couple of years back. Another one was company called Live Safe, where I got involved in the very early days. The idea there was if you see somebody committing a crime on the street, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to take a picture and put it on your Facebook page.
Right.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could take a picture and send it to 911? So they created that link. They discovered, like a lot of people have, that it's hard to sell things through to cities and police departments. But they got a lot of national publicity, and they did make some of those sales. But they also found that there was a big, easier to access market with college campuses, college campus security.
Right.
They had some nationwide stories about saving lives, and it's a good story. So that one also was acquired at a nice valuation. And they don't all work out that way, but I also helped start a vaccine company for staph infections and candidiasis. That company raised about $60 million in a combination of venture capital and government grants, and it completed a successful phase 2 clinical trial, but not on the specific indication that the big pharmaceutical companies would have got excited about.
Right. Right.
After 60 million, they needed another 20 million to go do the proper clinical trial. So they're on hold right now, doing some more research funded by government grants, and that'll restart at some point. But right now, it's kind of on hold.
Interesting. So, as you talk about some of these, have you also had ones where they just don't work out, and how does that usually go? Because I mean, again, you're like in the beginning when you were doing the Xerox stuff, right? You said out of the 60, 20 hit, 20 were in the middle, and 20 just didn't, right? So what happens? Like, I'm guessing as an investor in the portfolio, you have a lot higher hit rate because the scrutiny and the due diligence are different. Am I right about that? Or is it similar to what you experienced at Xerox?
Well, similar. We went out of our way in our 3i Ventures. We went out of our way to do some really serious competitive analysis of our companies. I mean, we did more competitive analysis, I think, than most of the VC firms do, in a more formal kind of a way. Based on the work of Michael Porter, people want to know how you do competitive analysis. You go read Michael Porter's books on competitive strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that gave us a little advantage. But, all the competitive analysis you do doesn't tell you when the world is going to be ready for something.
Yeah. You're right.
I've written about this recently. There's an article on my fredhaney.com website about, there's a series of articles about why companies fail. But one of the first thing that comes to mind is some of them just are too early. They had a really good idea, but we invested in the early 80s in a voice recognition company that had the technology then that is probably equivalent to what you have on an iPhone today, or to what was the Dragon Systems software. It was started about the same time as the Dragon Systems. Those people the people who started Dragon Systems were classmates of mine at Carnegie Mellon.
Oh, wow.
And, in order to raise some money, I was a lead investor for a round. We raised $5 million. But in order to do it, we had to bring in some new investors. And they were in a big hurry to get to market. And they pushed us to try and compete against the Kurzweil medical dictation system, which was semi successful at
Right.
translating medical language to text. And the company basically burned through its capital and went out of business. And had they just hunkered down for a few years and let Moore's Law operate, let the computer power increase, I mean, that's
Right.
what's enabling a lot of stuff today. I mean, I'm sure they've improved the algorithms some, but I'm not sure they would have had to. I mean, I think those algorithms were probably good enough to do a great job if they
Good
had
enough, right? Yeah.
today's processing power, processing
Yeah.
technology. Actually, we talked about the Xerox Macintosh. It's kind of the same story there. Xerox wanted to introduce that as a full page word processor in the late 70s for about, I don't know, $8,000 or $9,000, something like that. And
Right.
I wanted them to just lay low for a couple of years and cost reduce it and let the power increase and bring it to market as a real computer because it was the first computer that used the mouse and Windows and
Right. Right. I remember those. Right.
interactive way of computing. So there again, that was one that in my mind was just a little ahead of itself. Had they sat back and done some cost reduction and performance enhancements, they probably could have had a successful product.
I wish I would have had your insights about 5 or 6 years ago. We had a similar. I mean, we had a similar situation. We had a product, a data product that just the market was not ready for how to use the data, and we were just too early. And if we would have just laid low for 2-3 years and sold a kind of a light version and just waited it out, now everybody is wanting to use data in a different way, and our technology, we were probably in a similar situation there, and just didn't understand and didn't have someone like you that could have just said, hey guys, take a break. So the reason I say all that, Fred, is to say that I love the fact that if you can find the right resources like yourself that has this experience, you can really steer business owners that go and founders that go off the rails for the wrong reason. They don't think about product market fit enough, or they don't figure out, like you said, is the market ready? And I think that would avoid a lot of things.
These things, I mean, they happen. They happen too slow and they happen too fast. I mean, is the market ready? Is the market ready? Is the market ready? And all of a sudden, there's 100 competitors, 100 venture capital deals, and it's done.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
It's,
you want to hit it at the right time, but yeah, not too late, but certainly not way too early.
and the companies that really, hit the home runs, the unicorns, are often the ones that just hit that just right.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because they're smart or lucky, but probably some of both.
Yeah, some of both, right? I totally agree. So before I get into the stuff I want to ask you about advice for others, tell me about how you see, because again, at Carnegie, you had played around with AI before anybody even knew what that term was. But as you see the landscape with AI, data, automations, robotic process automation, all this stuff that's coming in and going to accelerate things, how do you see this affecting the startup industry and venture capital in general?
It's a real mix of opportunity and challenge. I think
That's all right.
it's really both. It presents a lot of opportunity and it presents huge challenges. And I'm talking about both from the company point of view and from the venture capitalist point of view. So for the venture capitalists are going to see a lot of interesting AI companies. One of my angel investments is in a hardware company that has optimized, is a completely different computer architecture design, different approach to architecting a computer. And it's aimed at large language models and the requirements, the huge power that gets absorbed by those.
Right.
And so it's really a powerful. I mean, it's a way of getting that job done with like a tenth or even less power. And there are going to be deals like that. I mean, the VCs are out there. They're doing a lot of these kinds of deals, and there will be a lot of companies. The VCs always overreact to these things. We had too many disk drive companies. We too many printer companies, they always go overboard with it, and I think that'll happen here. But the other, on the opportunity side, I think AI offers a lot of power as a tool for companies to improve productivity. I mean, I'm using it quite a bit for different things, but companies are using it for problem solving. ChatGPT is the best editor I know. It's
By far.
good for writing. And one of my best classes in college at Ohio Wesleyan was a class on how to write business letters. Well, ChatGPT obviously took that class. I mean,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
just describe a letter and there it is. So it can generate alternative solutions to complicated problems. It can offer customer support. I'm really anxious for ChatGPT or some AI system to replace all these damn telephone answering systems.
Yeah.
Well, if you're calling for A, press 1, B, press 2, C.
Yeah, just talk to an AI agent right away.
And the answer is I'm always calling about Q, and that's not one of the options. I think AI's got to, I know there are companies doing that.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, ranking applicants, fraud detection, product design and automation, that kind of stuff. I mean, Tesla's using AI to do a lot of part design and thinking that kind of stuff. Contract reviews.
Yep.
Regulatory compliance. I mean, there's one company, I just heard this on a podcast the other day, the ARC Institute in Northern California is identifying all the possible effects of future genetic mutations of cancer genes. So they can look at what if this happened, what if that, what if this, what if that, and play it out and say, well, these are the ones we should worry about and watch for and have a cure for. So, I mean, those kind of opportunities are just
amazing.
But here's the side of it. From a VC's point of view, how do I know who wrote the business plan?
Yeah.
I mean, and that scares me. I mean, I think that's going to change the way investing happens. I'll tell you a story. I had a pitch deck review with a company a few weeks ago, and it was a company, I'm not going to name it or identify it, but it was sort of in the Evite space. It had to do with organizing meetings and that kind of stuff. And it had some very clever wrinkles and good ideas.
Right.
And it was going to use AI to optimize parts of the game plan. Right. And after my conversation, I jumped on ChatGPT and I took probably 60 seconds to make a little description of the company. So, hey, I want to start a company that does this and this and this and this, but does this a little different and that a little different. How would I go about that? And I got a 5-page business plan back. And at the end, ChatGPT said, you want a pitch deck? And I said, yeah. And I got a 8-slide pitch deck that was almost as good as the one that I looked at. And I spent 60 seconds producing that.
Crazy, right?
I think that's going to make life really hard for guys like me who are trying to figure out, do I invest in this idea or not? And you'd like to think that AI can help you tell the difference between a human-generated deck and an AI. I got a letter it was from a president of a big institute a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It was kind of long. It was an introductory kind of thing. It was kind of long, a little slick, I thought. So I fed GPT and said, was this written by AI? And ChatGPT said, I can't tell. It said, here are aspects of it that would make me think maybe yes, but then here are aspects of it that would make me think maybe not.
Right.
So I think what's going to happen there, I don't know how you do competitive analysis. I mean, you can use ChatGPT or some AI engine to go out and look at the competition and try and sort these things out. But I don't know how you figure out who really wrote the pitch deck. I think it's going to focus investors more on the people.
Yep.
It's probably, my book, The Fundable Startup, says you got to have 2 ingredients to have a fundable company. You got to have a fundable idea and a fundable management team.
Right.
And I think the emphasis is going to shift more toward the management team. Because the only way through that is, well, let's make sure we trust the people. If we ask them who wrote the business plan, we think
they're honest.
Right. And we want to invest in people who wrote the plan themselves. So I think that's going to be a challenge.
Well, and I think going forward, I think you're right, Fred. The way we view it is right now where AI is, I think we call them co-pilots, right? They make a good person that much times more productive, right? And so I always think about if you were starting the business plan from scratch, right? You would say, this is a long slog to get to my first draft. What I think about AI is it gets you 70 to 80% of the way there, and then the human needs to then take it over. That to me. So I think it's smart to create your first draft and then edit from there. And to me, if I was looking at a good management team, that's what I would expect the answer to be.
Yeah,
Right?
no,
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to think about it. I mean, it's an invaluable tool, but
Yeah.
as an investor, I want to know that I'm
My
invested,
team put some thought into it, right? Or yeah.
that the people know it's not just that they understand what they're doing, but that they can execute.
That they can execute. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, real quick before I ask you really what I want to get to is just tell me something as a business owner, a VC person, an investor. What's something you've done? You've been playing with AI, something that you think other people, founders and CEOs, might find interesting with AI?
Well, I just find it. I guess two answers. Like I said, it's great at writing, posing. So, and I use it. I've used it, for example, to design one sheets for several companies. You know, the one page.
Yeah,
Here's
one pager. Love that.
So I can take 60 seconds and describe the company and say, give me a one sheet. And back comes a one sheet with color backgrounds for different sections and headings and highlights, and 2 columns, and fits on one page. I mean, it can save enormous amounts of time that way. The other thing I've done with ChatGPT, I have nothing against the others. I just am in a rush.
It's the easiest one to use, right? No doubt about it.
The other thing I've done is seeded complicated problems. I say, hey, my company is really up against it. We're having a hard time. We've done this and this and this, but we can't seem to do that and that. What alternatives should we be considering? How do we work our way through this? And I get good answers. They're not do this and everything will be great answers.
Right.
They're more like, well, here are some alternatives you should consider, and it could work this way, it could work that way. The other thing I've found is that ChatGPT is probably one of the best golf instructors on the planet.
All right, you definitely captured the audience's attention. How?
Yeah, I'm using it a lot. Since COVID, most of my golf instruction has been watching online videos. But I learned, a year ago that I could go to ChatGPT and say, just to give us some example, I have a really hard time coming over the top on my golf swing. This kind of a swing. The pros are all coming in from inside. How do I fix that? And I'll get some theory, here's why it's important. Then I'll get half a dozen drills to do, and then I'll get half a dozen links to videos that make
demonstrating, right? Yeah.
Point. So, and I can ask very specific questions like how do I shallow my club a little more on my downswing?
Right.
I'll get really good answers to that. You have to kind of want to be your own coach to use it that way. And I'm sure the pros would hate me for ever saying that.
No, you know what? I think you've just tapped into something that a bunch of amateur golfers that are founders and CEOs right now are saying, hey, that's a great idea. I never thought of doing that for my golf game. I love it. Fred, so as we get here to the wrap up here, listen, you've had experience in looking at companies, evaluating companies, getting funding for companies, and I think that we have a lot of people in our audience that are thinking about a startup or they're in startup phase. What advice would you give right now for someone that is either raising money or they're in startup phase, just based on your experience? And that might be a double-edged sword of a couple different answers, but I think a lot of people would be interested in your thoughts.
Well, a couple things. My book covers this pretty well. The Fundable Startup, How Disruptive Companies Attract Capital, and it's worded that way with intent.
Love that.
The two pieces of it are you've got to have a fundable idea, which to me, with my venture capital hat on, means it's a big idea. It solves an important problem. We're not talking about mundane businesses or service businesses. We're talking, it doesn't have to be high tech, but most really big deal are high tech because you can get some unfair, sustainable competitive advantage. So
Yep.
you need a big idea that is going to be difficult for people to copy. But you also need a management team that's going to be able to execute. And that's where a lot of companies have problems. Guys who have lived in laboratories all their lives have a hard time coming out and being CEOs of startup companies. They try it all the time. But one of the things my book tries to do is show people that it takes 15 to 20 years to create a CEO. I mean, I've got several case studies in my book of people who went from, like marketing and sales to CEO of sizable corporations. And it was a 15 to 20 year path with, a change every 12 to 18 months, a learning process.
Right.
So that's part of it. And the other thing, and this plays more into what I do and some of the recent work I've done, when companies put a pitch deck together, I hate to see them just think of it as a fundraising tool. The pitch deck, it ought to be part of the internal strategic planning process. And a lot of companies don't think about it that way. They don't create a pitch deck until they have to go raise money, and then they think it's kind of a one-shot thing. But I got to tell you, almost all of the pitch decks I see will not get funded. And
is that because they just lack the right structure, or they don't tell the right story? Or
well, some of them just don't have that great an idea or the right team. But I see some with a good idea and a pretty good team. And the problem is that they don't answer the right questions. They get a outline of a business plan or a pitch deck and they fill in the blanks. And they end up not really answering the question. So here's an example. And this is something I address in detail in the online class that I've created.
Yeah.
It's basically an 11-hour online video class about how to create a winning pitch deck. Companies all the time, I'll see the competition slide. And the competition slide will be a matrix that shows, well, here's our product, and we have these features and these features and these features, and here's our competition, and they have those features and those features. So we check more boxes, therefore we win. That's not the question. The question is not how does your product compare to your competition. The question is, what is it about your product, your approach, your competitive strategy, and the dynamics of competition within your industry, a la Michael Porter, that's going to allow
the 5 forces? There you go.
It's going to allow you to create a sustainable competitive advantage. That's a different question.
It's a completely different question.
But that's the question the VCs have to answer.
Yeah.
The VCs have to dig in and look at the dynamics and say, well, what other companies are there? Who are the vendors? How do they compete? What are the dynamics of competition? Who are the buyers? Who are the suppliers? Who else might come in? Who might go out? Industries are complicated beings, and you can't address that in one slide. I understand that. But you've got to at least show investors that you understand that problem. Another example that I see over and over and over is when they get around to describing their team. They list the members of the team, often give a picture, and then tell me who their former employers were. Well, that's not the question.
Yeah, what's their strengths? What's it right? What are they bringing to the table? Right.
The question is, what have these people accomplished that would give me confidence that they're going to build a successful company?
Yeah.
What have they done in the past that would give me that confidence? So my class goes through a template that I've used for years. It's actually free and downloadable. The class is not free, but the template is downloadable on my website. And it's 24 slides, and it goes through each slide and tries to say, well, here's the question that's really being asked. Here's the question you need to answer. And like I said, most of the pitch decks I see do not answer the questions that are really being asked.
Yeah, that's phenomenal advice. Again, we're going to have all the links for your stuff below on this podcast, and including your book and your website. And I got to tell you, I feel like I've gotten a lesson in the right way to think about a startup, and number two, for sure, to write, to think about what questions to answer in a pitch deck. So I really, really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and your experience, because I think that anybody that's thinking about a startup needs to go to your site and really go through your course.
I think it's a big help, and it kind of ties in with what we said earlier about artificial intelligence. I think there's going to be more emphasis on, do I trust this team? Do these people know what they're doing? Do I think they can execute here and make something happen? Or did they just ask ChatGPT for a business plan?
For a business plan. Exactly. Well, Fred, thank you for spending the time with us. Just before this goes live, tell everybody how to get in touch with you.
Website is fredhaney.com, and you can contact Monday Club that way. If you have a pitch deck that you'd like to submit, especially if you're in Southern California, you can submit a pitch deck through fredhaney.com website. Go to the Monday Club tab. And I also have a YouTube channel. If you just Google Fred Haney YouTube. One thing I haven't done recently, but for a while I was doing pitch tips, the pitch tips Zoomcast. So it was Shark Tank without the shark and without the tank. It was me interviewing a CEO, some questions. The purpose was not to get me to invest. The purpose was to help the CEO improve their pitch deck. But there's about 15 of those on the YouTube channel.
Oh, excellent. I will have to check some of those out, and we'll definitely put some links below here. But Fred, thank you for spending the time with us today. I think this is really insightful, and we haven't covered startups and VC enough. And I think your insights were just spot on and tremendous. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to get this thing live. So, well, that wraps it up for this episode of the Future Proof podcast, where leaders and technology meet. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Brian.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.